Welcome, everyone. Today, we'd like to talk about this grant maturity model. We have developed this 5-step model based on over a decade of experience working with numerous granting organizations in the private, corporate, and research, as well as state and federal grant-making communities. We want to share this model with you to help you assess where you are today and how to leverage technology, as well as refine your organizational processes to move up to maturity model. At level 1, grant management processes are executed manually and are overly burdensome. Grant staff can become overwhelmed as application volumes and funding volumes increase. Often increased volumes come with more complex eligibility and compliance requirements, as well as more rigorous review processes, which organizations are not equipped to handle with efficiency using manual processes. At level 2, organizations are better organized and moving away from manual processes to managing applications electronically. Business processes are better defined and repeatable. Grantees have more access to basic online applications. At level 3, processes are fairly well established. Application management processes defined at level 2 are becoming standardized across the organization and can now be more easily automated using grants management systems. At this level, we find that many of our clients are approaching this range as they have implemented more robust grant solutions. Rather than managing applications, they are managing programs by setting programmatic goals, establishing programmatic business rules, and have easily generated and repeatable reporting. And then finally, at the 5th level, organizations are setting goals across the organization, measuring the impacts of their grant dollars and integrating with federal granting systems such as grants.gov. At this stage, they're continuously monitoring impacts, improving processes, and reassessing. In a recent survey, we asked our client organizations to self-assess where they saw themselves in the grant maturity model. You can see that the majority of respondents see themselves at the managed and measured levels in the maturity model, which is great to see. They're more established and more rigorous in their processes, and they're leveraging technology to continuously improve. As we are also striving for continuous improvement, surveys such as this help us at eTRANSERVICES better serve our clients and the grant-making community as well. Many organizations are focused on simple application management. You'll see this mostly at the first 3 levels of the maturity model. They're using online forms to capture applications, proposals, and reports. Reports and analytics are less focused on impacts and more on tracking and logistics, such as the number of applications in progress or dollars granted per year. If budgets are managed, this is typically done manually using spreadsheets. Changes to programmatic policies have to be made manually across application forms, review forms, and reports. To enforce the new policies, practices, and procedures will likely involve changes in form instructions, but can't be enforced automatically, leaving room for integrity issues in the application submission. There are a wide variety of business workflow and grants management tools that can support a more robust grants management process. And we find that organizations are not necessarily taking advantage of those tools. So we're advocating putting more structure and discipline into your processes to take your grant process from simple application management to a more programmatic approach. To do so requires a little bit more rigor, but it's completely achievable. Granting organizations need the ability to measure and assess data to inform your program requirements. This is necessary when developing big picture strategies for impactful funding. We're seeing that compliance demands and the desire to improve require us to do more than just capture forms. There is a need to capture additional data reported from grantees and other data sources, such as funders and government agencies. We're also seeing the need for workflows and business processes to accommodate different business rules and process paths depending on grant programs. Organizations have a need for more detailed and more frequent updates on budgets and programs, and we're also seeing a need to manage funding sources more effectively, with better access to funder systems to submit proposals and search for funding opportunities. So how do we start to move up the maturity model? For organizations trying to get from the first level to the second, where they're becoming more defined and reactive, the business value we see here is they're starting to eliminate some of those manual processes and be able to access grants and applications data electronically. At that first level, granting organizations are doing things in a very manual way. Processes are not well defined, and they're not taking advantage of technology much beyond email submissions of PDFs or even paper applications. When they move to becoming more defined and reactive, they start by making organizational changes, defining and documenting processes so they become more repeatable. They develop application review and approval processes that have more rigorous standards, and they create standardized award letters and grant agreements. From a technology perspective, they can develop and publish online forms using tools like Google Forms. They establish a website maybe where grantees can access those online forms, and they take advantage of those tools' automatic spreadsheet creation to track applications, and then maybe use mail merge features to create letters and agreements. So as organizations move to becoming established and reactive, we see the added business value of eliminated processing time and repetitive processing steps. And now we see real-time access to data and better staff and grantee collaboration. When organizations progress to becoming more established and proactive, they start to look at some additional changes, such as defining processes that are less stovepiped and span across programs and the organization. They start to define key roles and responsibilities, bringing in other departments such as finance or compliance. They encourage more proactive outreach to the grantee community through invitations or targeted outreach efforts to specific communities. At this time, they might establish rubrics and score sheets for reviewers to score and comment, and a repeatable review process. And then organizations start to shift their thinking toward how to automate these repeatable processes. Through technology, organizations want to start investing in grant management software to help manage all of these processes and responsibilities. Leveraging that technology can help generate automated notifications, scheduling of reports and payments, and award letter or grant agreement generation. And organizations want the ability to provide portals for applicants and reviewers to access applications and reviews in real time. As organizations become more managed and focused, they're starting to see real business value here. They're beginning to streamline the process of opening new programs. They're able to have better enforcement of business rules, and they're able to begin to measure progress. Granting organizations start to see real benefit from both the organizational and technological changes. Processes are repeatable, and they're starting to leverage technology much more effectively. Now they want to start looking at grant processes from a more programmatic perspective. They start by identifying programmatic metrics, what can be achieved through a particular grant program, and how are we going to measure that achievement. They define what data they need to measure those achievements and how and when and to whom they need to report that data. They can define specific business rules at the program level, and each program can have unique needs, opportunities, goals, and reporting requirements, so they need to document what those are. And then they may manage a program budget and track outgoing funds and grants related to that program, as well as incoming funding sources. So with that added technology, they become much more sophisticated. They begin to be able to visualize metrics through data collection. They can leverage that data with compliance reporting to funders, oversight, management, and community stakeholders. They can enforce program level compliance through automations and validations on things like deadlines, dollar thresholds, and other business rules. They can provide a fully self-service portal for grantees with information on available grant opportunities and programs, as well as full access to award and post-award information and the ability to collaborate with grant staff. They can allow grants managers to better manage their work pipeline through notifications, to-do lists, and tailored dashboards. And they begin integrating with financial systems to send and receive payment information, and then with e-signature systems to fully automate the grant agreement process, and maybe even funders systems such as grants.gov to ingest available funding opportunities and other data. Finally, at the fifth level of the maturity model, organizations are well on their way to continuous improvement. The business value here is that a granting organization's limited funding is being used more effectively, and they're making a bigger impact in the communities they serve. This is where they're measuring impact so that they can assess how they're doing and how they can improve. They're defining goals that are SMART, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, and also defining objectives and outcomes related to those goals. So looking at what do we have to do to reach those goals and what do the results look like at the end? Once they have the goals in place, they're capturing data from grantees to measure against those goals. They're also looking for feedback from the grantee communities on how programs are impacting them. Once they have the raw data, they can more easily see what needs to be done to improve. Are grant dollars focused in the right area? Are they reaching the community the way they set out to? Do they need to increase outreach or change focus? Granting organizations should be constantly evaluating and reevaluating to see how they're doing. Granting organizations also have compliance requirements, so government agencies may require specific data in a very specific format, and funders need to be assured that their money is being allocated to the right kinds of programs, and that the right goals are being addressed, and that the grant dollars are reaching the right grantees. So they need to plan for those reporting cycles. Technologically, the organizations need to address how they will collect all of this data, aggregate it, visualize it, and use it in reporting. They can do all of this with the right tools. A grants management system has to be able to manage goals and be able to visualize the data in a way that's meaningful and useful, where organizations can track outgoing dollars against those goals. They should also present the data in a meaningful way to stakeholders such as funders, boards of directors, and grantee communities. And they should be able to aggregate data easily for reporting to any of their stakeholders. So what's driving the need for grants management technology? It's really three things. The first is that compliance requirements are becoming more complex and more sophisticated, where funders like government agencies have specific reporting requirements, and where creating manual compliance reports and doing manual data collection is no longer practical. The next thing is that getting the funds out to grantee communities more quickly is critical. Using as an example, recent COVID-19 grants, where grantee communities desperately needed funding to deal with keeping businesses afloat during shutdowns, we saw that it was much more important to get money out quickly. And then the third thing is that finally we see the impact analysis is becoming much more important to granting organizations who need to make sure every grant dollar counts. Whether you're managing a large volume or you're a small nonprofit, being able to ensure that an organization is making a difference. Introducing automation and technology can help you as you progress in your grant making process. We talked about some of the technology changes that should be considered when moving from one level to the next. No matter where you are in the maturity model, having the right tools can help speed that progression. UDPaaS is one such tool. It can support any of the technology changes needed to get you to the next level, whether that includes things like employing automated workflows, notifications, business rules, and data validations, or visualizing your data through reports, analytics, and dashboards, managing budgets much more effectively with specialized budgeting tools and visualizations, having changes made to program policy automatically apply to your grant intake and review process and monitoring requirements, and then offering a complete grants management solution that can be customized and tailored to your specific grant lifecycle.
So I'm going to demonstrate to you just a few examples of how technology can support your initiatives using a product, UDPaaS. So the next slide. UDPaaS is a full featured cloud-based automation tool that supports the entire grant lifecycle. So from budget management to program definition to applicant tracking, and review, application review capabilities, and all the monitoring capabilities. And it is a platform that is very rich in capability. It is a customizable solution, and the UDPaaS platform has a number of capabilities and or tools that allow you to create forms, create dashboards, um, um, define workflows, and generate documents. It all sits on a platform, a FedRAMP authorized platform to keep your data protected and secure, and supports things like role-based access, a single repository, and also single sign-on capability. So what we're going to highlight in the demo is we'll look at some of the dashboards to aggregate data and highlight anomalies and thresholds. We'll look at how one goes about establishing a program, including eligibility, award maximums, budgets, and business roles. Then impact analysis. Jamie mentioned quite a bit about goals and objectives and how we accomplish those, but we'll talk about how we can go about defining those measures and then collecting the data that's needed to finalize those measures. We'll also take a look from an applicant perspective or prospective grantee, and in particular, highlighting some of the collaboration and the ability to provide guidance information to your grantees and or internal staff. So let me go ahead and share my screen. For starters, this is the landing page of UDPaaS GMS. This is a fictitious grant management system where I have lots of sample data that I've added into the system. And I am a grant administrator for this organization. There are many other users in the organization, but my responsibility is to manage and administer the grants for this organization. So I'm going to go ahead and click through. And the first thing that you'll notice that every role that logs into the platform has a dashboard. When we get into those higher levels of maturity, we're not just managing one grant application at a time, but we're looking at our data from an organizational wide perspective as well as a grant program level perspective. So what we have over here on the left are all the grants that I have that are organized by state. So if I wanted to get rid of the ones from Connecticut and Texas and New York, I just want to take a look at that pie chart. So notice that it's clearly it's a dynamic graphic that you can easily save and download as a PNG and incorporate into your executive level presentation. And then over here on the right, I have all the grant programs that have been awarded grants. So you can see here, I have 145K worth of grants in my education grant program. I have a community grant program, strategic initiative, disaster relief, and operating grant. So again, these are dynamic graphics. So I'm going to go ahead and click through. So you see that 145K worth of grants are split up into 6 different grants. And so you can, again, like the other widgets or any dashboard widget, you can save it to a PNG and include in a PowerPoint presentation. So lots of things. These are all configurable dashboards, and there's a dashboard for each and every role that you define within the platform. Now, one of the important things when you're managing grants from a programmatic perspective rather than just a pile of applications, we have to define a program. So as the grant administrator, I'm going to walk over here to program management. And these are all the programs that I have defined in my system. So I'm going to have take a look at this one program called the Education Grant Program. So I'm going to allocate a lot of dollars to this grant program, and I'm going to define that. So you see some high-level descriptions of the program definition, capturing some internal documents. But I also keep track of metrics. So I have like target outcomes, like I'm targeting to assist at least 5 adults. We're trying to assist at least 154 children under 12 years old. And then over here, these are the actual outcomes. So it looks like I actually reached out to 4 number of adults assisted. So these are the actual numbers. Now, with every program, there are multiple calls because we will typically have a program, but we want to open up for applications only for specific time frames, and we call those calls. So you see here, I have a call here for my education grant program in 2022. So let's go ahead and click through and look at some of the details here. So this is where we get to define the details of the program. So you can see that I have a program manager. This is the name of the call. This is the Education Grant 2022. Looks like I got the year wrong here, so I'll go ahead and update to 2022. It is a year-long program, and I'm developing this program for some specific goals that I am trying to accomplish. Just hold on for a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We do have $1 million budget. We want to start in May 1st. We have just a short description of our grant program. We have a little bit of descriptions about the program itself, some eligibility rules, some more detailed descriptions, background and purpose, total funding again, how much we're expecting to award, and then eligibility information. So lots of information that we're capturing. We capture all kinds of very important deadline dates, right? So dates of when we may use a letter of intent before submission of a full proposal. So this is information that we're capturing at the event. Now, this happens to be a live program in my sample database, and you can already see that 11 people have applied for my grant thus far. Now, with every grant program, you typically have eligibility questions. So you can see I defined 2 eligibility questions that are going to be used in downstream processes in the system to ensure that I'm only getting the individuals that I want to apply for a grant organization. So my 2 questions, and again, this is sample and hypothetical data, but I only want to service the Washington, D.C. area, and I want to make sure that you're only a 501(c)(3). Now, this form is dynamic. So, for example, if someone passes the eligibility clause, this is the exact phrase that I want to send to them when in an email if they are eligible. And if they're not eligible, I'm going to send them this message. So lots of dynamicness within the program definition. And then over here, more official correspondence. You know, I may want to send them an official email or even letter that says, you know, this is the title of the letter. This is the exact content that I want in the email. And then if I just want to preview what that email will look like, you know, it'll look something like this. So you can see that these hashtags are representing, you know, the dynamicness of the name for the individual that we're working with. And then finally, collaboration. As we're going through this process of defining a grant, we're collaborating back and forth. So you can see right here, ask some questions here, and I'm informing my executive team member that I'm going to have some information to him by the end of the week so he can approve this particular grant, and then I'm responding back to him. So real-time, in-context collaboration is one of the nice features within the program, and it helps you become, you know, more effective and efficient in defining a program. Now, the other thing, if you're a federal grant maker, so many of you may know this, but you have this document that you must produce, which is called the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So for commercial organizations, you may not have this, but this is just a form or a document that just lists the contents of the program. So it talks about the call description. There is information about eligibility and total funding that's going on in there. Now, another federal requirement for federal grant makers is they also have to populate what's called grants.gov, which is a clearinghouse for all federal grants. And you can see that we link our grant to the actual grants.gov entry, which is basically all of this information was sourced within our system. So this is an important thing, especially for grant, for those that are receiving or are applying for federal funds. Okay, so switching gears a little bit. So for every grant program, we often have goals, right? So what we have the ability to do is dissociate this program, this 2022 program, to a particular goal. So this is my goal, and this is the definition of my goal. So if I click through my goal, we quickly look at a few things, right? So the objective of this grant program is to help children in poverty read better. What are the objectives? We're going to create after-school reading programs and mentor programs to assist over 100 children in Washington, D.C. So notice that this is time and geographic bound. It's quantifiable, i.e., I can measure it. So if I serve 105 children, I'm probably doing well. If I'm only serving 40 children, I'm probably not doing so well. And then what are the outcomes? Well, the outcome for this specific goal is I want to improve reading scores. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the standard test after 1 year of participation in my program. So those are my goals, outcomes, and objectives. Now, with those goals and objectives, we typically need to figure out how we're going to measure it. So we support two types of measurements, programmatic measurements and societal measurements, right? So programmatic measurements tend to be a little bit more simple to measure in that we're just summarizing the total number of sessions we deliver. We're going to count the number of children that were participating. But when it comes to societal measurements, that can be a little bit more difficult, right? Because now we need to summarize the test scores in the Washington, D.C. area and compare those results after we deliver the program. So that may be something that we may have to integrate our platform to get those test scores into the system. Now, with every goal and outcome, there's also different inhibitors, things that are preventing us from reaching our outcomes. So this gives you an opportunity to document those inhibitors. And I have two of them here, an inhibitor type called people and materials, and maybe volunteer recruitments have been lackluster, so perhaps we need an orientation program or something like that. Or we have delayed shipment and materials. So anytime you want to edit information in the table, you can do a quick pop-up and you can see that you can add multiple entries in here. We can say that we have some management issues, and then we can put some verbiage in here and save that. And we'll close that. So, all right. So other times we have financial targets, right? So we're trying to spend $800K. Well, we've only spent $150K thus far, and we still have $649K to grant out. And that is 11 grants, if you remember when I was talking about the program. So if I wanted to see those 11 grants, I'm going to take advantage of my doc, which allows me to see the grants over here on the right. So these are the 11 grants that they're talking about that are contributing towards this goal. So a little bit of color coding scheme. You can see the blue ones are in draft, the green ones are approved, the yellow ones are submitted, and I believe the gray ones are just the organization has been invited, but they haven't prepared an application yet. Okay, so the other thing I wanted you to know too is this is a goal, right? Now notice over here there's two programs. So that means I have two grant programs that are contributing to that goal. So we've looked at the Grants 22 program, but I also have another grant program. So this is very similar to the last program, same sort of information, but just a completely different program. So I just wanted to make that point that everything is interconnected within the platform. So you can have multiple goals to one grant. You can have multiple programs to a single goal. Last but not least, financials, right? So in order to fund these grants, you often have finances that are associated with your grant program. So I have a couple of funding sources here, donor funding 2021 and sustainability funding. But a lot of times I like to look at my budget from more of a hierarchical perspective because it's easier for me to understand. So you can see right here that I have $1.7 million worth of funding, and I have 373 or 22% of the budget allocated in this bucket. And then I have 78% that's allocated here. So that's 1.3 million. And then that 1.3 million is divided up into this 14%. This one's 30%. Operating fund looks like I'm spending 250K or 14%, and education funding I'm spending about 350K or 20%. So a really nice way of tying the whole programmatic process by establishing the goals, producing output that's needed for compliance, i.e. the notice of funding opportunity, And then have defining all the measures and the objectives, and then finally tying it to actual dollars that you are receiving or that you are acquiring within your organization. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We talked quite a bit about how one goes about defining a grant program within the platform, but now let's take a look at the actual application that the prospective grantee or applicant is applying for. So I'm going into a different module within the platform called applications. So what I want to highlight here is the data that we can capture for a grant. So let's go click through this particular grant. And I'm going to just quickly kind of walk you through some of this information, but you can see she's working for American Association of School Administrator. She is the applicant applying for the grant. You know, I have some overview information. One of the things that's nice about these platforms is we provide the guidance text right within the context of the form. So when the grantee is completing the information, they know and understand what they need to add. So let's pop over here to budgets, because budgets are always interesting, and it's often a very complex part for a grantee to fill out. But you can see that we broke out the budget. So Karen is saying for her organization, she wants to spend about a $411K, and she's splitting it up in these different buckets. And then we have some expense items towards the bottom of this table. So nice and easy ways to get data. All right, so moving on very quickly, I'm showing you this system from an internal perspective, i.e. I'm logged in as Kenny, and Kenny is the grant administrator. But let's log in with Karen. So I'm going to use a feature within the platform that allows me to log in as Karen. And remember, Karen is the grantee. She's the person from outside the organization looking to apply for a grant. So she can go through these this widget here, and these are all the opportunities that she could potentially apply for. So if she wants to just do a little bit of reading about the program, she can pull this information out and pull that out and read and decide if this is a good grant for her to follow. So we have a little bit of a table of contents. So if she wants to pop over, like, am I eligible to do this? You know, she can do that. Or what are all my deadline dates? Or, you know, what let's read that description again. So if Karen does decide, she just clicks the apply button and she gets information about, well, she gets a blank form essentially that she can apply for the grant. Now, it's very interactive in that these are the grants that she's applied for, so she can click through and see the grant application. So you can see this is very much the same form that you saw earlier, but this is from a grantee perspective as opposed to the internal perspective. And then finally, going through this portal, you can also render lots of different information. So you can see that Karen has some progress reports that she has to complete. So that's other information that we can display with progress reports. Now, one of the things associated, you know, we spent a lot of time about goals and objectives. So I wanted to go back and just give you a quick peek. For those that have been involved in compliance activities and impact analysis activities, we know that data is very important to be able to do that. So what we can do is we can do make a form available to grantees to actually populate the information for who they served. So for example, this organization here, they would complete this table after they've completed their grant. So you can see that they have a total of 36 people. We asked them to break it down by age groups, male and female, and we asked them to break it down by geography. So you can imagine if you're the person responsible for compliance or impact analysis, you collect all this data at the application level, and then you can aggregate that data at the program level, which is a very powerful capability, because this is how we go about getting the information about how well we are doing to comply to this grant or how well our impact is going. So over here, I have all the impact metrics. So these are the grand totals for all the grants, or in my case, all 11 grants that are contributing to this goal. All right, so we're on the final piece of the demo. Just wanted to give you a really quick look. Another important thing in grant making is looking at your grants from more of a geographical perspective. So one of the nice features of UDPaaS is being able to take an address and be able to overlay it on a map. So these are the organizations that are providing the services for my particular grant programs. So we're right here in Alexandria, Virginia, and you can see that grant is specified there. And I get to use a lot of the Google Map capability to be able to drill down as far as I want. And then if I want to get a satellite view, I can see exactly where they are in this particular building. And then, of course, I can open that up and find out information about this organization, some leadership meeting, and maybe even collecting more demographic data with this organization, and then all kinds of other information we can capture. And notice that, again, just to remind you, everything is connected in the platform. So if I wanted to see which grants they were associated with, I can just click this, and there's the grant that they're associated with. All right. Let me go back to the home page, and that concludes the demo part of my presentation. So just to summarize what we've learned today, Jamie shared with us, the maturity model, which gives us guidance to determine where you are today and how you can leverage technology as well as refine your processes to move up the maturity model. And the baseline place, or the minimal capability you need to get to, is to have basic application management. So you have forms online, you have proactive features where you can collaborate with your grantees and even your internal staff. This is a foundational requirement. But when we mature to manage the grant process at a programmatic level, we want to look at program management. So you saw all the capabilities we had in defining the program, the eligibility requirements, the goals, the measures, and even capturing the analytics to those programs and goals. And then finally, achieving a level where you're continually managing impact. And that's where we are in this lime green, impact management. So this is where the goals and objectives are very well defined. We are measuring data on a frequent, if not real-time basis, where we're using data captured from the grantee, maybe data from the public, data within your organization, and you're actually measuring the effectiveness of your program, or how effective you are in achieving your programmatic benefits, but also the societal benefits that you're attempting to achieve. So UDPaaS supports all these levels of maturity, and it allows you to incrementally achieve higher and higher levels of maturity. So with that said, I'm going to conclude, and I'm going to turn it over to open the floor up for some questions.
Before we jump into questions, I'd like to first share our accreditations. eTRANSERVICES has invested heavily to ensure the professionalism, continuous process improvement, and discipline for deploying such solutions demonstrated by our organization and project teams on a routine basis. These large investments in Scrum certification, PMP, CISSP, and CMMI benefit our clients. I would also now like to open up the floor for any questions. All right, it looks like we have a question in the chat. Can we get an assessment of what level we are in our company, and if so, how?
And the answer is yes. So it's very important to understand where you are today and where you want to achieve. And as what's displayed on the screen, if you're in a situation where you do, let's say where you're at a level 2, you have some basic forms that are online, but you want to become more proactive and maybe even more focused in managing your grants at a programmatic level. eTRANSERVICES helps you do that. So what we do is we assess where you are today by interviewing and having a consultative engagement with with the company, and then help you build a very practical and reasonable roadmap to get you up to higher levels of maturity.
Okay, since it doesn't seem that we have any more questions at the moment, we did have one submitted during registration. The question was, how do I get started on increasing my maturity level for grant management?
It's a very similar answer to the last response in that, we will craft an engagement to do an assessment of where an organization is today, develop a task plan and a roadmap to get them up to, higher levels of maturity. And it really depends on, what level the client is currently at, and it will help build the roadmap to help you get to higher levels of maturity.
All right, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Lastly, we would like to invite you all to connect with us on social media. We are on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Also, a copy of the slides will be sent out shortly after the webinar, along with a survey where any feedback you provide will be greatly appreciated. Thank you all and have a great day.